And it was a negative mail.
It's a maze.
Right.
Yeah, it's here.
Right. Get her out of here, please. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Okay.
Thank you, Eddie.
She said that he was like, take a
So
picture.
Tracy Brown. Zion Hill.
I don't know who she is.
Tracy Brown.
I have no idea who she is.
All right. One of the, okay. She's from Newark.
Okay, but I have no idea who she is.
She ran for mayor of Plainfield.
Okay.
Awesome preacher. Tracy Brown. She's going to be at John's church. John has joined the church. Oh, wait a minute.
I pray for Louis.
Gentlemen, we are on the air.
You know why?
Ladies, gentlemen, we are on the air.
I pray for my colleagues.
I know. Council members, we are on air. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Newark Municipal Council's pre-meeting. Madam President, I'd like to start today with the interviews for the appointments. Is Kathy Dowden in the chamber? I am on page 21.
Yes. Not
Dowden
appearing,
is
Mr.
not here. We will come back to her later. Anne Marie Salesman, please come to the to the podium. Ms. Salesman, would you just state your name and address for the record?
Anne Marie Salesman, 316 Vose, V-O-S-E Avenue, South Orange, New Jersey, 07079.
Ms. Salesman, you have been nominated by the mayor for an appointment to the Commission on Homelessness. Do you have a statement that you wish to make to the council before they begin their questions?
I would like to take the opportunity to thank the council president, for having me here today to accept this appointment. I've been working with the Newark community for the past 18 years as a volunteer worker as well as an employee at several facilities, including University Hospital, Rutgers University, and St. Michael's Medical Center. For the past 3 years, I have organized and facilitated a community health and wellness fair for the West Ward. And I've also worked with students in serving the homeless at St. John's Kitchen. And I'm happy to be here today to serve on this committee.
Are there any other comments? First, let me add a personal reference. I am delighted, absolutely delighted that you have decided to share your gift with the city of Newark. Your reputation precedes you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank the mayor for having the wisdom to invite you. Don't be fooled by the fact that she does not live within the border of Newark. Her heart is truly here.
Thank you.
Only a couple blocks away.
Yeah, you're only a couple of blocks, the councilman
Most of them-
said. He probably could take a brick and throw it right on top of your house. But I look forward to your service.
Thank you.
I am so happy.
Thank you.
I'd like to sponsor this candidate.
Second.
That's mine. I put it on.
Oh, I'm sorry. It doesn't say that at all. The councilman from the West Ward has insisted, not asked, has insisted that he be the sponsor. With your permission, Councilman Osborne, I'd like to second it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Thank you.
I sponsor only because I recommended her. And You know, Dr. Salesman has been a passionate advocate for health care and homelessness for a long time. We worked together at the health department for several years. And so I know her work ethic and her commitment to what we're trying to do here in the city. So I thank the administration for accepting my recommendation, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And
Thank you.
let me just say, she brings Seton Hall here.
Oh, yes.
And we do
Oh,
the health
absolutely.
fair the last, I think this will be the 4th year.
Yes.
We do the Westward Health Fair together. So I think she's a great addition. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
All right.
Congratulations. We will be voting on this tomorrow.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Alicia B. King, are you in the chamber? Please step to
She's
the
present.
microphone.
Oh, no, she's present.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Alyssa B. King, 541 Bergen Street, Newark, New Jersey.
Ms. King, you have been nominated by the mayor for an appointment to the Caribbean Commission. Do you have a statement that you wish to make to the council before they begin their questions?
Yes, I would just like to thank the mayor, the members of the council, and the members of the Caribbean Commission for this wonderful appointment. This appointment means a lot to me. Growing up with parents who migrated to this country from Guyana for a better opportunity, this would be a wonderful chance for me to help with the efforts going on in the city to educate the people of the community and to unite the people of the community on the culture of Guyanese and other Caribbean members. And that's it. Sorry, I'm nervous.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. What country do you represent?
Guyana.
Okay. Everybody's, going, Guyana.
Yes, there's a lot going on
Congratulations.
right now with the Guyanese people.
You should bring some roti.
Roti? Okay, yes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, thank you.
Fiordalisa Lopez?
He's not present, Mr. Clerk.
There is one additional person that is coming on as an added starter. Is Robert Budsock in the room, in the
He
chamber?
is present.
Please come to the microphone.
Director of Integrity.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please state your name and address for the record.
Robert Budsock. I live at 4 West Holly Street, Cranford, New Jersey.
Mr. Budsock, you have been nominated by the mayor for an appointment to the Commission on Homelessness. Do you have a statement that you wish to make to the council before they begin their questions?
I would just like to say that I have been working at Integrity House since October 15th of 1984. So I'm approaching 35 years of employment here in the city of Newark. We've just celebrated our 50th anniversary at Integrity House, and we are, thank you, Mildred, and we are committed to helping individuals overcome addiction, associated mental health problems, and the other social problems that frequently accompany addiction, such as homelessness, being unemployed or underemployed, and helping them advance their education. So I am pleased to be recommended by the mayor and thrilled to be standing in front of the city council.
Comments?
Council President? I just want to say congratulations and thank you for taking on another task here in the city. It is an honor to have you serving on this commission. I personally want to thank you and your team, the whole staff of Integrity, for everything that you guys do. It does not go unnoticed. You guys are a staple here in the city, and I think we all can agree to that, especially with the new Hope One van that I constantly request almost every day to be at a different location in the city. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your dedication to the city. Thank you.
I want to thank you also for your willingness to step forward. Integrity is an institution that has been a mainstay and critical to the survival of those who are addicted and or homeless. I've had the pleasure of working with you for approximately 20-plus years. I chaired the Board of Integrity for about 10 years. I am happy that the mayor had the wisdom to select you from among many to become a part of this important commission. I know that you will put your expertise to work immediately to further develop solutions, not just to drug addiction, but also to homelessness. And they go hand in hand, as you well know. You've been a great asset, Bob, to this community, and I'd like to sponsor this candidate. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Gonzalez.
Let me, if I may ask a question, do you still operate the house on the Martin Luther King for the women, battered women?
It's not necessarily for battered women, but yes, we do have we have housing on 667 MLK, and that is for women who are in recovery, and in some cases, it's women and children who are in recovery.
I remember going there when it opened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. We vote on this tomorrow. Ms. King, we vote on you as well tomorrow. But you have the sentiment of the council as we have interviewed you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Madam President, I remind the council that Ms. Lopez, who is not available, if she does not appear today, the council will have to, we will be returning this to the administration as required by law, although the mayor can renominate. In addition, this is the first for Ms. Dowden, so if she is not here at the next meeting, then we will also have to return her application. Let's go to start the agenda on page 2.
There is a reappointment, no? There's a reappointment?
Yes, but we
For
don't
judge.
do interviews for reappointments.
I want to sponsor it.
You want to sponsor the judge? No problem.
Second.
So, yes, we can do that. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Yeah.
No, but we'll call tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Are there any questions on for the reports and commissions for the boards? Ordinance on first reading, 6FA is the short-term rental use ordinance.
Any added starters?
Slew of them. B is the, would add a
Sorry,
new,
the Corp Council.
Good morning, all. Kenyatta Stewart, City of Newark Corporation Council. So we're going to ask that all the short-term rental items be deferred. I did have a long meeting with the people from Airbnb. We have been in contact with them. I do want them to have an opportunity to hear what's really going on in Newark. I actually sent them out to do some research because they were comparing Newark to California and New York and everything else. They don't realize that that's not the situation that we have here. I think they do have a different appreciation for Newark compared to those other places. So I sent them to do some homework on and get some information. They did give us some information about, a hotline and everything else that they have for neighbors that I'll share with you all if you all are interested in. And of course, I'll make it available so that if anyone in the public needs it as well.
Thank you. Mr. Corp Counsel, there is a word that's in the ordinance, and I've been planning to ask either you or the VA for a definition. It's the word minimum standards. And one of the reasons I ask is it's no secret that one of those establishments happens to be in the area where both Cleo Tucker and Assemblywoman Tucker and I live. And I need a definition of minimum standards, because periodically, on days when it's bulk, there'll be about 7 or 8 mattresses, and I've mentioned it, that are put out front to be. So if we could include something, it's very unsightly. I mean,
So the issue with, bulk and things of that nature, that's a separate and apart from Airbnb. That's just a flat-out owner responsibility. I'll have the folk from DPW look into that issue to make sure that they're putting their bulk out at the right time, and more importantly, that they're putting the right amount out. I know there's been a number of complaints about excessive bulk being put out at one time, so I'll call
appears-
Khalif down and he'll, address that issue.
Council President.
So,
yes, I did hear him first. Councilman Ramos, then Councilman James.
yeah, Corp Counsel, I did have an opportunity to very briefly look at email that was sent by, I guess, representatives from Airbnb a few weeks back regarding, some of the concerns that they have, where they feel that the city's being very aggressive as far as regulating the allowance of Airbnb within the city. And I think some of the proposed, regulatory actions are good for the city, as far as ensuring that any property that wishes to participate as an Airbnb site has an opportunity to register ahead of time, that there is compliance with local zoning regulations, where you don't have situations where in neighborhoods that are, they have one-family homes where, basements are being rented, or this is being used as a pathway for rooming homes. So I think those things are positive as far as what the city is proposing to do, and I understand you are considering some of their other observations, but I'm not sure if they're able to provide you with data as far as how many Airbnb nights that the city have, over the last few years, like how popular is Airbnb within the city? Is there an opportunity for your folks to maybe break that out, by ward, so that we can see, where Airbnb activity is happening? And then from the business administrator and the CFO standpoint, estimate, potentially how much revenue that could mean for the city once these ordinances are cleaned up and enacted.
Sure. So in my brief discussions with the folk from Airbnb, they said they have an estimated about 300 owners throughout the city who use their property as Airbnb. They didn't give me the details about the ward. I think part of our...
I think the real value is nights, right?
No, definitely,
You
definitely.
have 300 properties that may be Airbnb properties, but
Doesn't mean
one
everybody's using it
person
all
could
day,
stay
all
for
week.
10 days, 5 days, so I believe that the fee that the city's looking to enact is per night, right? And
It's an annual thing.
oh, it's annual, okay.
But I mean, it's still important to get the data that you're asking for.
Councilman James.
Kenyatta, I think this is key that we don't allow this to become like boarding houses or rooming houses. And I think the council president, when she referred to the mattresses, that, if it's a 4-bedroom house, then they're not creating an 8-bedroom house. Because I think that is negative towards quality of life for residents of the city of Newark, particularly those who have, 1 or 2 family areas, and now all of a sudden they have an influx of 12 people staying at, a house that normally would be a 4-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. So I just want us to have caution and be mindful that they're not overusing whatever premises they're trying to use as Airbnb.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilman, yes.
Yeah.
Gonzalez.
How quickly you think this would move after the changes that you're making? Because we have dealt with this for a long time. Maybe we can table it, you work on it, and then we bring it back so that we don't have it in the agenda all this time. It has been deferred at least 3 times, and in some cases 5 times. So why don't we table it, and the work is done, and then when we bring it back, so it doesn't show up on the agenda?
So, Councilman, what I would like to do is, if we can hold it for one more meeting, I think it gives them a sense of urgency to get the information to me. What I don't want to happen is I don't want them to be in a space where they're able to continue as they are now, and the fact that it's on is putting pressure on the folk from Airbnb to get the information to me. You have to realize that people have Airbnbs throughout the city of Newark right now unregulated. So that means the company's making money, and people who have the Airbnbs are making money. So if there's nothing out to put pressure on them to get the information to us, you know, doing it unregulated helps them.
If the zoning ordinance doesn't allow hotels and they are using the house as a hotel, it's a violation of the zoning ordinance. So I believe that we can go there and fine them for having a hotel where they are not supposed to have a hotel. So we don't need to specifically regulate the Airbnbs. I believe that the zoning ordinance allow for that.
But Councilman, the problem that we have is, you know, the example that the council president mentioned was something that, you know, she had the opportunity to experience herself. Unfortunately, the one thing that we are struggling with is, where are the Airbnbs?
But you have just told us that we have 300. So ask for the address of the 300.
Well, again, that's part of the struggle that I'm having with them.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to give it up.
Well, I believe we can go online and see where they are in the city of Newark.
You
Go online.
You Google Airbnb in Newark and you get all the addresses.
They don't have addresses, I'm being
Not that
told.
simple.
Search Newark Airbnb.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you could search Newark Airbnb, just in case if you're looking for it, to see what's available, like to rent.
No, I was just
Okay.
pointing to James to make sure he writes it down.
So, Madam President,
Yes,
just to be
Councilman
clear,
Ramos.
the only fee that the city's getting is the registration fee, and it's once a year, and then the improvement district is actually the one that's getting the 1.5 daily percentage.
No, well, the improvement district gets a portion of it, the city gets a tax, and then we also get the registration.
So there is a tax that the city collects based on the daily stays, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's why, to me, the number of nights is important. So if those 300 approved sites for Airbnb had, you know, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 nights in 2018, then you should be able to estimate registration fee total, and also what would the daily tax result in, potentially.
So if
Mr.
possible-
Clerk, Counsel, can I help you out for a minute?
Sure.
With the consent of the council, you've asked that we defer it once more. Would that be agreeable? It's a recommendation, and hopefully within the period of time before it comes back for us, you will have the answers, or then I think we should
Understandable.
table,
Understand.
as Councilman Gonzalez has indicated.
I appreciate it.
So, I'm sorry.
I would recommend that the owners have a hardwired fire alarm to these properties in case there's an emergency and the guests don't know the address.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hardwired instead of batteries.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, all 3 items will defer to the next meeting.
A, B, and C?
A, B, and C. I think and
What
D.
about D? D is the tax? Will we be advancing or deferring on D?
The same thing.
Deferring.
It is.
Defer also?
All 4.
Okay.
A through D.
E is the security ordinance?
So I'm going to ask for that to be deferred one more time. I'll be updating the council members within a week with a proposed new ordinance after meeting with public safety.
Have a second for defer?
Second.
Next item, Mr. Clerk.
F would establish an employee ownership loan and loan guarantee program, and rules for qualifying certain businesses as minority, women, and veteran-owned.
Comments? Next item.
G is a 30-year tax abatement for the Irving Turner Apartments. This is for a project to rehabilitate 4 buildings containing 94 affordable housing units.
Sponsor.
Second. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Councilman Osborne.
H is an ordinance granting a 30-year tax abatement to the Center City Apartments Urban Renewal LLC. This is for a project to rehabilitate 2 buildings containing 49 affordable housing units.
Council as a whole.
Ordinance is on public hearing, second reading, and final passage. 6 PSNF-A is the parking authority, the parking garage.
Comments, questions?
I had a quick question regarding that. What would be the rent after the 30th year? On the 31st year, what would be the rent that the city has to pay? And subsequent years?
I see the director and part of his staff. Won't you come to the microphone?
Good morning, Anthony Mack, Executive Director, Newark Parking Authority. I'm going to yield my time to Eric Terrain, Financial Advisor on the project.
Don't go too far, Director.
Good morning, Eric Terrain, Financial Advisor. The company is the Terrain Group. Councilman, at that time, the loan would be paid off, and that would be strictly an issue between the parking authority and the city to negotiate at that time, or you could do it sometime previously. But right now, we don't anticipate encumbering any city funds further at that point.
Other questions?
What about the parking revenue? Who shares on the parking revenue that is going to be generated by the parking, by the 600 parking spaces subsequent to the 30-year period?
So really the answer in some ways is the same. And what we've structured here, it's in contemplation of the current RDA. The current RDA did not speak to that subsequent period. It is a good question, however, particularly because at that point, the lease with the Prudential Center would have actually expired, so you'll be in an entirely different economic environment. Whether the Devils stay or do not stay, you'll still have an outstanding property, and I would presume once you get into that time period, again, the city and the parking authority would work that out.
And have you contemplated, or the plan contemplated, transferring the property over to the city after the loan has been paid?
It has not been, and for this reason. So typically, when you see that, the city would occupy 100% of the building, the lease, and 100% of the lease would be used to pay off the bonds. In those situations, we've seen the property revert back. In this situation, beyond what you're leasing, there's still substantial property that's owned by the parking authority. So to my understanding, I've not seen that contemplated in the RDA at all.
And the parking authority happens to be the city of Newark?
That's beyond my scope.
So let's say the parking authority and the city of Newark are going to occupy probably 95% of the building.
That's exactly, of the office space, you'll occupy 43,000 square feet of 45,000 square feet. That's exactly right.
So, and the parking spaces are going to be generating revenue for the first 30 years to pay the loan. And subsequent to that, we don't know what is going to happen. And I just venture to say that the parking is going to be there and somebody is going to be using it for parking purposes.
Agreed. That's
so
agreed.
It's going to generate some income. Who is going to be benefiting from that income is my question.
Yet again, so from my perspective, I was retained to put together this transaction, so I think that between the executive director and the council, or maybe some future executive director and council, that gets worked out. It was just beyond the purview of what I was retained to do.
Thank you.
But I think we might need to,
James, and then Councilman McCollum.
I think we might need a director now to explain, because, I mean, we want to know up front, when we're voting on this, what's going to happen after the 30 years. You gave an example where sometimes it will revert automatically to the city. But we understand, that we're not going to occupy all of the space. The parking authority is going to have some of the space. We need clarification on that.
Good morning, Kenyatta Store, City of Newark Law Department. So the actual lease, as mentioned a few moments ago, it's silent on this issue. I guess the question becomes, is the director prepared to talk about what's going to happen 30 years from now at the moment? Normally what would happen is, at least in my opinion, as just said a few minutes ago, it would at least revert back, or, we'll deal with it 30 years from now. None of us will be, of course, the people dealing with it.
Speak for yourself.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm talking about at least retired. But the actual lease does not speak to what's going to happen 30 years from now. It's silent on that issue. So the parking authority wouldn't be able to say at the moment what the plan was at that point.
Okay, but why is it silent?
Well, that's another question.
Well, I'm sorry, Anthony Mack again, Executive Director. Why is it silent specifically to what, Councilman James?
What happens after 30 years?
Well, after 30 years, I think the reason that the lease is silent on that is because at that point, the city would have the ability to renegotiate the space, whether the city's going to continue to even have offices in that building, in that facility, or move somewhere else. Part of the benefit that Councilman Gonzalez was talking about is that the city is getting 258 free parking spaces. That has nothing to do with the lease. That's part of the RDA. So the city, as long as you're in that building, or even if the offices move out of that building, there's still 258 parking spaces free to the city for forever. So whether or not you rent space in that building or not, the city still benefits from this property. You receive parking tax from, right now it's at $300,000 a year. If that parking tax goes up, which I'm assuming it will, over time, you continue to reap the benefit of that parking tax. If you move out and move out into other office space, you no longer pay rent, but you still get parking tax and free parking spaces. So there's going to always be a benefit to the city in this project. You're not guaranteeing any bonds. You're not spending any money to construct it. Every study that was done shows that the parking authority is the parking authority, in fact, is the entity which the city created to do just this project. So that's what parking authorities are for, is to not only manage on-street parking, but off-street parking. And I'm glad and hoping that council members will see the vision, because as I talk to parking directors, not only around the state, but from around the country, and they ask me what happened in Newark. And I say, what do you mean what happened in Newark? And they say, well, you have one of the busiest airports in America. You have Penn Station and these transit hubs, and the parking lots around it are privately owned lots. Imagine if those were municipally owned lots. All of those lots on 1 and 9 were municipally owned lots. What the kind of revenue and the kind of city this could be, and the places we could take it. So I'm hoping that the council sees the vision, that this is a great project. There's always going to be benefits to the city. There's usually no redevelopment agreements that I'm aware of, and I'm not a complete expert in redevelopment, but getting there, that once a project is paid for by another entity, that they would build it, finance it, pay for it, provide the city parking spaces or any other benefit, and then just revert it back to the city. I mean, at some point, in 10 years down the line, based on our financing agreement, there's a possibility for the city to discuss buying the project or condoing it out and owning a certain portion of it. So I think that's the best I can answer your question.
But that's not contemplated on the lease. The lease says that there is no reversion and no ability of the city to purchase the property. So that precludes what you just said. They say that the city, 10 years from now, being able to purchase the property. The ordinance speaks to the city not being able to purchase it, or for the property to revert back to the city. That, to me, let's say, the city is entering into a one-way lease that is a 30-year straitjacket to the city. The city cannot. What are the termination options of the city?
Okay, so I'm going to yield my time to Everett Johnson, the attorney who drafted the lease.
Good morning, Council.
Morning.
Edward Johnson, Bond Counsel to the Parking Authority of the City of Newark. Just want to reiterate to the councilman that, as Mr. Mack said, that parking authorities are geared towards on-street and off-street parking. Because the lease is silent to who will control the parking, when the lease expires, the parking authority will control the parking. But I would advise not to view the parking authority as some sort of outside third-party vendor that you guys have no influence over. You know, this council created the parking authority, the council appoints members to the parking authority, this council can dissolve the parking authority. So it's not as if in 30 years, if for some reason some deal could be worked out that's beneficial to the city, that the city couldn't have some leverage to create a new situation that makes sense for the city financially. So I just want to reiterate that this is a public entity. This is not a third-party private parking provider. You guys appoint the members. You guys have significant influence over the parking authority in general.
I don't remember appointing any member of the board.
Yeah,
Councilman.
we vote on the members. Yeah.
Councilman Ramos?
Yeah, you know, I have a few points I want to make. You know, one is that the parking authority essentially is, you know, an entity that it's not a part of city government. We understand, obviously, the city, through the mayor and ratification of the council, has some influence as far as, you know, the members that are appointed there. And what I'm not always clear on is how much revenue does the city realize as a result of the parking authority? And I know over the last few years there have been, you know, additional efforts as far as enforcement throughout the city. Before, it used to be enforcement primarily in business corridors. That enforcement has now spread out into the neighborhoods. It appears like you have a lot more enforcement officers. But, you know, I'm not clear necessarily on how much more revenue that's actually meant for the city of Newark. And an audit report that this council had an opportunity to review just from a few years back, in fact, showed that the parking authority was sitting on a substantial amount of revenue. And that was something that was noted in one of the audit reports. So what I would like to see through the BA is an assessment made by the administration over a 5-year period of how much revenue the parking authority has actually transferred over to the city. And then we can make a determination as to whether or not, you know, that revenue has increased. The parking deck itself, obviously, we have a mandate that we have to build parking as part of the original agreement with the construction of the arena. But the vehicles that are going to park there for special events that the city would draw taxes from, right, the parking tax, those vehicles would park in an approved lot regardless, right? Whether it's the lot across the street, the lot 2 blocks down, the lots around Penn Station, you know, the vehicles that come for Devils games, that come for special events, they would park in a lot somewhere, and the city would, in fact, you know, collect that tax. And based on what I see, that is the only revenue that the city, in fact, will be realizing from this parking deck and office space. You know, the one advantage that the city has, and again, we're paying a prime lease amount for the space that we will be occupying in this particular building. So you know, the RDA does include free parking for city employees, and as Mr. Mack mentioned, if the city were to ever vacate the space that we lease there, the city still has rights to those spaces. But going back to the revenue, you know, this isn't a development that's a rateable to the city. The only money that's coming to the city is the money that we would be collecting on a parking tax. But we will collect those resources on a parking tax regardless, because those cars are going to come in and they're going to park somewhere. And those parking lots are under the same mandate that the parking authority would be in to transfer the tax back to the city of Newark. So I just want to note that for the record.
Councilman James, just maybe you'll be able to incorporate comments.
Okay, I think part of the reason we're here also is because of an agreement with the Devils that we have to provide the parking. That's just, you know, been brought to my attention, so it's not solely how much the city's going to make off of it, even though we are going to realize some profit. And just give me 1 second.
Madam President.
Sure.
I'll come back to it. I just lost the train of thought. Yeah, I just lost the train of thought. I'll come back to it.
And Everett, my position from day one is that I nothing against the park. I thought this represents the most valuable piece of property that the city owns, and the city should have sought out, different options as far as this proposed use. And what we've seen in places like Bloomfield is that there is a partnership that's been established where you see parking decks that have been built that are run by their parking authority, but then you see residential development on top of those parking decks, 5, 6 stories. The property becomes a rateable. The parking authority has a responsibility to manage, the parking aspect of that development project. Why couldn't we see something like that on that site? Was that something that the authority looked at? And again, the advantage for the city, parking tax, the advantage for the city is just a significant, substantial revenue that comes in as far as taxes, because this represents one of the most attractive sites in the city of Newark, walking distance from Penn Station, walking distance to the arena, right in the downtown area. Who wouldn't want to live in a development on a site like that? Was that something that you guys looked at, or was it from day one, we're going to build office space and we're going to build a parking deck?
Well, I wasn't initially involved in the initial conversations regarding what the plan was, so I'll let Anthony speak to that, but I will say that, generally speaking, and I represent Bloomfield as the bond attorney, the township solicited redevelopers for projects, and the township hired the private redevelopers. It wasn't the parking authority that sought out the private developers who built the housing. And then they required developers to enter into agreements with the parking authority to control the parking in those projects. So it likely wouldn't have been the parking authority's role to bring developers to the table for this project. We were really the redeveloper appointed by the city. So it would have probably likely been on the city side. But like I said, I wasn't involved in any of those initial discussions back then. By the time I came on board, this project was already moving.
In Bloomfield's case, the property is a rateable, right? Because there's a private developer that develops.
Not the parking garage.
But the
They're pilot
residential.
payments, mainly pilot payments, correct. Payment of taxes, not,
So that goes back to my original argument that the city should have vetted out different options for that project. And again, it's not your position. You're here representing the parking authority. This council very narrowly decided to transfer ownership of the property to the parking authority, and now you obviously have a responsibility to come up with a redevelopment plan, because the time is ticking, and I understand the position you're in. So thank you for your insight, Eric.
The last little piece I just want to mention was the court issues, expanding the court, more office spaces that we needed on the municipal level, the building next door being archaic, and, having more space for city departments. So that is one issue in consideration.
So I will respond to a few comments that were made, and I'll let Eric Terrain speak as well. I'm going to try to go one by one, but I may be out of order. With regards to the amount of money that's contributed to the city annually, I'm sure the BA and the director will provide the information to this council. But the statute limits the amount of money that the parking authority can transfer to the city from its coffers. It's a statutory limitation for any authority, how much they can transfer over to municipalities that created them. So whatever that number, but obviously with that being said, it's a percentage. I don't recall from my head what the percentage is, but the more money the parking authority raises, the higher your contribution will be, because it's a percentage of revenues that come in that maximize the limit of what you can receive. With regards to parking taxes, you are accurate that parking taxes would be collected by the city, even for other private vendors, but I think the distinction here is it's the parking authority that's aligned with the city. I'm pretty sure that our numbers will be very accurate for the number of cars that park in our garage. I can't speak to the accuracy of the parking in other private parking lots as to whether or not there's accurate accounting going on, but I know that with our garage, at least you'll be comfortable that every car that comes in that's supposed to pay a parking tax will be paying the parking tax. I don't know if you have that comfort with regards to some other lots. That's something I wanted to add. And two, in terms of the benefits, it's not just the parking taxes. You have to look at this deal as a holistic deal. And that, remember, we're adding a finance department to this building, and the finance building on Broad Street now, my understanding is that that will enable the city to then take that building and to sell that to a redeveloper, and that will generate tax revenues or pilot revenues for the city down the line. So this building will enable the city to not have to build separate finance building, but to acquire finance building through the parking authority and take that existing building and create a rateable for the city. Two, the rent payments for this space are less than it costs to construct the space. So we are subsidizing a portion of the space that's going to be used for the city's municipal courts and the finance department. Three, as Councilman James just mentioned, the city's been under a court order, and I don't have all specifics, but to transfer its storage space, because apparently where files are being stored now for the courts is not an adequate facility. We're going to be able to take those files now and put them in a brand-new adequate facility that will pass muster with the state Supreme Court in terms of what's required to store your files. And I believe there's going to be a violations bureau that's going to be transferred over to that building, which will then again create more space in the court building for potentially adding more courts, which could also generate more revenue. So I don't look at this, I advise you not to look at this just strictly on parking, but look at what can benefit the city with regards to developing the finance building currently that exists. The extra revenues may be generated by the violations, by the courts, by virtue of us taking more space, compliance with the New Jersey Supreme Court mandate that you guys create more files and additional parking taxes. So I think that it's a holistic approach I'd like to see look at this project that is not just an individual, whether we're going to have parking or not parking. And once again, it's the parking authority of the city of Newark, of the city of Newark. It's a related subordinate entity. You guys definitely have leverage in a way on this particular authority in ways you may not have over another independent third-party vendor if for some reason you guys aren't able to strike a deal that makes sense to the city in 30 years. That being said, I'll turn it over to Eric.
And Madam President, could I just mention that Everett mentioned the issue of whether or not the city is collecting the parking tax that it's owed from private operators, and that's something that through your chair in the clerk's office, I'd like the BA to look at and respond to and give us his assessment as to whether or not the city is in fact being shortchanged, as Mr. Johnson mentioned, and that there would be a difference, quote unquote, if the parking authority managed the deck for special events.
And just lastly, and I'll be very brief, a few points regarding the overall development of the project. So CBRE did a study on behalf of the lender, and it was determined that this project was the highest and best use for this particular piece of land. It's certainly the case that when I came on at about the same time as Everett, this project had already started. That being said, we did evaluate what other opportunities may exist, and essentially the 250 parking spaces and a portion of the parking garage that's going to be used by the city in perpetuity. From a residential or any other type of user, it would be very unlikely you could ever get a payback for that space, because that's $9 million in debt and about $400,000 in annual revenue that has no payback. Recently, I've seen reported that the value of the property is $10 million. That's the municipal assessment. That's not the value of the property. The value of the property is $2.1 million. That's from an appraisal done, again, by CBRE in December. And of that $2 million, there's at least $1 million of environmental cleanup that has to be done. There's a gas tank there that has contaminated not only the soil, but the groundwater. In fact, the U.S. Post Office was also contaminated, and the parking authority had to pay for that as well. So the net contribution to the city, while still significant, is more like $1 million than $10 million. Lastly, I will say, in a comprehensive rent study of the city, the average rent for a property like this should be $32.75 per square foot. The city's rent is $27 per square foot. We've structured the project in a way so that the city would come in under market, so we're starting about 20% under market, and again, that's from the December CBRE appraisal.
The last point, Madam President, this is more for the BA. Last week we met the new tax assessor. Would it be possible for him to give us an an opinion on this particular site, like what he believes the appraised value or assessed value is for the site, and more importantly, what would be the estimated, property tax revenue that the city would realize if this was a private development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk?
I remind the council that at a previous meeting, there was an attempt to amend this ordinance because apparently there's an issue about some of the square footage numbers. We will be bringing that before the council tomorrow as well.
Next item.
D is would designate Sussex Avenue and Newark Street as a multi-way stop intersection.
Sponsor.
Second.
Next item.
C is would change the Corporation Council's ability to settle items to an amount not to exceed $40,000, settle lawsuits.
Council as a whole. Next item.
D is this is the change to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which would greatly expand its capabilities.
Yes, Councilman Ramos.
Yeah, again, I fully support this, and I also want to, through your chair and the clerk, for us to send correspondence to the governor's office. There is a piece of legislation that Senator Ruiz sponsored and I worked on that would allow us to have a secondary zoning board, and I believe both houses have approved that piece of legislation. I believe that would be a greater help than just having 2 additional alternates on the board, because right now the issue is that the agendas for the zoning board meetings are pretty much packed, and the applications that are ready to be heard by the Board of Adjustments are not getting dates for like 4 or 5 months because of the fact that the board is so busy. So having a secondary board would allow us to spread out the number of applications that are being considered. But I do support this because there are a few instances, because we don't have enough members, it doesn't happen that often, that applications have to be adjourned. So this would help. But I think amongst the council and the clerk, we have to come up with a agreement on how these 2 alternate members are going to be identified and appointed. Because right now, each one of us has an opportunity to recommend candidate, which is ratified by the council, but if you're adding 2 additional members, the question to your chair and the clerk is, how do we come up with these 2 members? And I believe that's something we need to discuss prior to this being adopted.
That's a good idea. I'm familiar with the legislation. Mr. Clerk, through your office, could you provide every councilman, I guess except Councilman Ramos, with a copy of the legislation as proposed by Senator Ruiz? And if you could do it today before the meeting tomorrow, it would be great. Have a chance to have some additional information.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think my request for a conversation is about the one that's on the agenda, but how do we appoint the 2 additional members? And then the other thing I would like to see through your chair and the clerk, talk to Elmer and Ron informally, is to see if there's a way that we can make the terms of the Board of Adjustment members consistent with the terms of the council members, because there seems to be a lot of overlap. Members are appointed midway through our terms, and their tenure extends beyond our 4 years, and I believe that that's something that we should look at and figure out a way to fix.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Next item.
E is the Weequahic Preservation LLC 30-year tax abatement. This is for a project to rehabilitate 268 units on Elizabeth Avenue.
Sponsor.
Second.
Roll call. I'm sorry.
Again.
Harry.
I would like to bring to the council's attention, however, that we are at this time missing several documents from this application, and if we have informed EHD that if we do not have these documents, when we get to the meeting, we will be deferring action on this item.
Understood.
It's withdrawn, and we are now deferring this?
If they don't get the documents.
If they don't provide them, I mean.
Yes, if they provide the documents, we will move forward. F and G, we will be deferring until the special meeting of Tuesday, the 12th. That brings us to resolutions. Resolution 7R1A is a second amendment to the redevelopment agreement of Old Third Ward Redevelopment LLC.
Is someone from EHD here to talk about this? No? Okay. Is someone from EHD here to talk about this item? I don't see anybody, so I'm going to ask for it to be deferred.
They're right there. She's right there. EHC.
Which item?
Was this 7R2A, correct?
7R1A?
We're on 1A at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry, EHD. I'll come back to you guys.
1A is a labor agreement with attorneys and the public defenders in the law department.
Next item?
1B is the use of a state contract to purchase cargo vans. We are now on the item, the amendment to the Old Third Ward Redevelopment LLC.
So, Council President, 7R2A, EHD, do we have an update regarding the agreement?
Good morning, Council. Basola Taiwo, Legislative Director of EHD. Regarding the agreement, the reimbursement agreement, we do have one. It's been reviewed by our office. We're passing it back and forth, just making sure it clearly states, it sets forth what we need. I gave your office a copy of that agreement. It's going to be an amendment to their redevelopment agreement so that that reimbursement agreement lives with that redevelopment agreement into perpetuity until a certificate of completion is issued.
So has it been signed by all parties?
No, it hasn't been signed yet because it has to come here because it's going to be an amendment to the redevelopment agreement. Any amendment to a redevelopment agreement has to be approved by council.
I'm going to ask for this item to be deferred.
Yes, that's perfectly okay.
Great. Thank you, Bisola.
No problem.
Yes, Councilman Ramos.
Just an observation with 7R1B, and we mentioned this to the purchasing director last week, I don't know why we can't just identify which division.
I'm sorry, 701, I didn't hear
The vehicles.
letter.
The cargo trucks or the vans. Like, why can't they identify which department is requesting? This happens to be water and sewer, because I looked at the resolution. But if you look at the summary here, it doesn't state which city agency or department needs the vans or the vehicles. Just an observation. It shouldn't be difficult to do, and it would make it easier for us to consider these requests. So I don't know if it's the clerk that's not putting in the summary or the purchasing department, but we used to have it.
Councilman, I will ask our people that are reviewing these to make sure that that is inserted by the departments going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Naja Davis, Assistant Purchasing Agent. It is within the body of the resolution, so I'll make sure it's in the summary going.
Yeah, because not everyone has access to the backup, so.
No problem.
Next item, Mr. Clerk.
2B is the referral of the proposed Sixth Amendment to the Newark Living Downtown Redevelopment Plan to the Central Planning Board.
Next item.
Seven R 5A is a contract with subrecipients for emergency services for the homeless. This is the YMCA. The next group of resolutions are ratifying and amending, authorizing contracts for the contract with the subrecipient to provide HIV/AIDS-related health and supportive services. 7R5B is the AIDS Resource Foundation for Children. C is the Central Jersey Legal Services, Inc. D is Newark Beth Israel Medical Center. E is Public Strategies, Inc. F is Apostle House. G is the Meals on Wheels. H is the Smith Center for Infectious Disease and Urban Health. I is the Francis Xavier Bogart Center for School of Nursing. J is the Zufall Health Center.
Through.
That would conclude the HIV/AIDS. 7R6.
Madam President, a quick question.
Yes, Councilman Gonzalez.
Public strategies, is that the same contract for auditing the services? Or what was
Good morning, Dr. Mark Wade, Director of the Department of Health. I'm going to yield to Ketlin Alsbrook, who heads our HIV section.
Good morning, Ketlin Alsbrook, Project Director for the Ryan White Program, Chief of Staff for the Department of Health. Public Strategies, Inc. is a vendor that provides grant writing and quality management support as a consultant.
has been doing it for?
Correct. Thank you.
Seven R6A, we will discuss with Corporation Counsel in an executive session. 6B is the First Amendment to Settlement Agreement regarding the remediation of soils at the Ironbound Recreation Football Fields. Corporation Counsel, do you want to hold that off until executive session as well? Hello? Eight A is a ceremonial street dedication. B is a ceremonial street dedication. C is a hold harmless indemnification agreement for a community meeting with PSE&G. 8D are various recognizing and commending resolutions. E are various expressions of profound sorrow and regret. 9A is authorizing the use of competitive contracting for the procedures for vendors to administer extra duty employment services. We have discussed the appointments. As you can see, there are 16 speakers on the hearing of citizens. Trying to get to the council as added starters, there are several items. The first is an ordinance that would amend the definitions of and adopting land use regulations pertaining to medical marijuana treatment centers.
That need not to be an added starter. If somebody here to discuss that now, because, I mean, we going to wait till tomorrow?
Is there someone here?
Is there someone?
Is there someone from the administration to discuss this item?
Madam President, I agree with the councilwoman. You know, I have, you know, obviously some, I've expressed before that I believe this council needs to create some very strict zoning regulations regarding the not only medical, but the possibility of recreational, because we've gotten a lot of calls from residents who are, you know, concerned about what the city's approach is going to be, what are going to be allowable areas where these types of businesses may be established. And you know, that's something that I believe this council needs to take a very active role in, and we need to hear from EHD as far as what their interpretation is related to existing zoning laws that the city has, and where these types of establishments may be allowed, and whether or not this council needs to consider some amendments to further protect, you know, some of the concerns that our residents have.
Council.
Yes, Councilman Gonzalez, and then Councilwoman McIver.
Yeah, we have, let's say, this marijuana issue presents opportunities and presents some challenges. Let's say we have where can we grow it? Where can we, let's say, elaborate or package it? So it's going to be more, I believe, more than one zoning change so that we can accommodate for the growing of it, for the packaging of it, for the distribution of it, and for the retail sale of it. So I believe that it has to be much more than just one ordinance, because I may not want someone, let's say, to be growing marijuana on Branchwood Park, let's say, or the county may license someone to grow marijuana in Branchwood Park or any other park, or in your backyard. You say you have a big backyard. Can I grow marijuana in my backyard that I can sell to somebody else to elaborate and distribute? So I believe it's important that we consider this item before we have an issue in our hands.
I agree. Councilman James, and finally, not finally, but next, Councilwoman McIver.
I think a bigger issue is what are we going to do on the social justice side of the marijuana issue? There are many individuals who are right now in jail for marijuana-related offenses. How are they going to be released? How are their records going to be expunged? How are they going to, in the future, respond to questionnaires on job applications as to whether they were arrested for a crime, whether they have used drugs, if it becomes medically and recreationally legal? I think that's a major issue. I believe in the press, the mayor of Newark and Jersey City have taken a position that they will not let this legislation move forward without substantial analysis of how, again, individuals will be released and records will be expunged and moving forward. Corporation Counsel, you might have more insight on this issue.
Councilwoman, before co-counsel speaks.
I just want to say, before we get into like a long, drawn-out conversation about the ifs, ands, buts, and whats about it, first of all, we do not even have an item in front of us. That's number one, which is my issue. We were about to hear the added starters list, which, of course, I prompted the conversation in regards that it shouldn't be an added starter because it's a hot topic. It needs more discussion, obviously, upon the administration and the council. But more so, the reason for me wanting to speak was, in regards to the added starters, a while ago we said that if there were added starters coming before the council, that we would have the representatives here to give us an update about them. Some things are very hot topics that honestly I don't appreciate viewing as an added starter for a meeting tomorrow, and there's nobody here to discuss it, and I don't want to spend hours tomorrow discussing it again as an added starter, and we haven't had the opportunity to take a look at it, review it, all of these questions, all of this conversation and discussion, and hours of talking about this. It really is, all of our time is valuable, and I cannot do this today. So if we're going to hear about some added starters that the clerk has, either the people are here to discuss them right now or they be moved to the next meeting. And we've been talking about this all the time. Each meeting we say the same thing, and we keep getting a list of added starters, and we have no information. And that's why we have so many questions up here about an agenda item that we do not even have.
We have nothing.
I want to put a statement on the record for the council. We have asked that when there are sensitive, highly volatile items, that we get some kind of notice prior to receiving. It is absolutely not fair to ask us, especially, and it's been noted by everyone, that as an added starter, we understand that your office is overwhelmed, understaffed, and we need to fix that so you can do your good job even better along with the VA. But this is a subject that is up close and personal. It deserves attention. And not just to be brought up at the last moment. And so I commend that to you and the BA for items, not just this one, but for others of a similar ilk. It's not fair to the council.
And Madam President, could I just say one
Yes,
thing?
Councilman.
Councilman James mentioned some important issues, but unfortunately, locally, that has to be worked into whatever agreement, the state has in place when it, finally approves, recreational marijuana. The reality is right now, there were a number of licenses that were approved for medical, and some of those licenses were approved specifically for the city of Newark. So within the next few months, or 6 months, or a year, you will have 1, 2, 3, I'm not sure how many licenses were approved where these businesses will be established in the city of Newark. That's not something that's prospective, that's something that's already been vetted out. The state health department reviewed the applications, they approved X number of applications, and some of those businesses will be established in the city of Newark. And I think we need to get a better understanding as a council as to what is the process that these entities have to follow in order to be able to establish the medical marijuana centers within the city. Do they have to go to the Board of Adjustment, like other applicants do who have, change of use? That's something that I agree with the Councilwoman that we need to have a more extensive conversation about, but that's going to happen very soon. And then after that, if there is an agreement at the state level about recreational, that becomes the second wave of businesses that could establish themselves within the city. So I think first things first, we have to understand how are these medical marijuana centers going to establish themselves in the city, and what kind of process do they have to follow, if any. Maybe there are already zones that are approved, and all they need to do is come to City Hall and get a business license. But on the council side, we have to deal with the fact that the community that lives in those areas is going to have to be aware as to how this establishment was approved, what are their hours of operation. That's all stuff that we have to be on top of, and that's the only point I raised it for.
So, yeah,
If I may,
everybody has their stories to tell. So Councilman
Yes,
Gonzalez, then I'm going to be next.
I believe that also should have some equitable or equity in the distribution of the licenses. Let's say you may have individuals that are going to be applying for these licenses, and African Americans and Latinos should be part of the distribution of the licenses, and not only Anglos should be participating, or the people with monies should be participating. I believe that it would be equitable to have let's say a pool of participants that represents the citizenship of the city of the state of New Jersey.
I agree with the council. In the first round of marijuana, medical marijuana, the groups that got licenses in this region were all from South Jersey.
Yeah.
Not one South North Jersey organization or consortium was awarded a license. And right now it's in litigation, because you have groups that are suing, alleging that the process at the health department wasn't a fair process. But I agree with the councilman on the business side. We have to make sure that it's just not a few of these very well-established national companies that are going to come in and run this market in the state of New Jersey. And my other point is that the state can't keep all the revenue. State's looking to heavily tax recreational marijuana, and the reality is that the cities are going to deal with all the headaches, from the law enforcement side, healthcare, you name it, code enforcement. That's all additional responsibilities that your municipalities have. And the state's looking to keep all this tax money for themselves, and the reality is that the cities are the ones that have the burden of responsibility. So,
Quick second.
Okay. Councilman.
I just want to add that several municipalities have already stated, as far as law enforcement, that they don't accurately know how they're going to measure whether someone's drunk or someone's high when they're pull them over or they get in a car accident. So that's a whole other piece of it, we need to look at. Is someone, behind the wheel, not aware of everything's going on because they've had too many drinks, because they're high, or because of both, or something else?
Corp Counsel, just a quick, my observation. About 3 months ago, I was invited to a meeting in the South Ward I did not know the purpose. It was set up by someone for me. And when I arrived, the agenda was, Mrs. Crump, we'd like for you to be one of the persons to select a drug dispensary in the South Ward. My response was, you mean a drugstore where they sell drugs? He said, well, I hate that you put it like that. I said, but is that the truth? And he said, yes. I said to him, I don't want it on Bergen Street. I don't want it on Clinton Avenue. I don't want it. And I listed a whole a number of streets citywide. And that was even, Corp Counsel, I hate to, excuse me.
Sorry, I apologize. I was just trying to make sure they're prepared to follow through with the discussion.
And this was before even pen had been put to paper. There was no legislation, but he felt comfortable speaking to me about this issue. So is there some conversation going on that we don't know about that you need to bring to us? The floor is yours.
Let me jump in for corporation counsel. There are a number of people who think that game now, but the corporations that ultimately set this stuff up will be professional. They have corporations. There'll be boards. It will not be the average person who today says, I want to open up a marijuana store. Let me bid on the city's contract. That's not the way it's going to work. But there are a lot of people talking that way.
Quick.
So, as far as this added starter item here, I do apologize for the confusion. I do know that there has been some dialogue in the past about the medical marijuana aspect of it. We cannot have any recreational discussions here because, quite frankly, it's not legal at this point. So there's no reason for us. Well, what I'm saying as far as recreational aspect of it, we can't have any dialogue about it because, at this point, at this point, it's not legal. I do know that, as you all know, that the mayor and a number of other mayors from throughout the state have come together to indicate, as you all said, that they're not going to support any legislation that doesn't speak to social justice and things of that nature, and to make sure that minorities have an equal share. Unfortunately, the myth that today we're all going to be able to just open up a corner store, make it into a drugstore, make a load of money, and call it what you want to. That myth has been going around, and people have been spreading as if it's going to be a great thing for people of color and people throughout, minority inner cities, for lack of a better word. But as you know, it's going to be a corporation. There's going to be a process, right? But we're not there at the moment. At this point, we're here to discuss the medical aspect of it. I do understand that the health department is involved with who gets the license, and there is some litigation on that issue now. At this point, from what I understand, at least from this ordinance here, without going into too much detail, this is just about, can we agree that we're going to zone it in a specific place? In other words, we don't want medical marijuana facilities to be in certain areas. Now, you have to also realize that it's medical, it's medicine. We cannot look down upon anybody with any medical condition. Some people haven't appreciated the fact that, people have an issue and they need medical marijuana to handle that. So you shouldn't see this legislation or anything else, anything different from if a person has cancer or diabetes or anything else, because you cannot frown upon medical treatment whatsoever. I will accept the fact that we can defer this item to give the folks.
We don't have anything in front of us regarding what you're talking about.
Well, and
That's
again,
a problem.
I agree. What I'll do is I'll give the folk from EHD an opportunity to come back next week to have a longer dialogue about this ordinance in itself. Evans from EHD is here to talk about
What you're saying, Corp Counsel, and again, I don't have the legislation, so I can't really comment, that it would be treated as like any doctor's office, so they could be on Prospect Avenue in the North Ward.
Oh, there's some issues with it.
So I have to review the zoning recommendations as far as what the interpretation of EHD is.
Sure. Like I said, the health department does have a huge say-so on, what's the plan for medical marijuana treatment facilities and dispensaries and things of that nature. But like I said, we'll hold that for a future meeting.
Question.
Councilman McCallum.
Do you know the process now for medical marijuana? Can your doctor just write you a prescription?
I personally do not know it. I haven't done the research, but I do know that there is an evaluation process. Your physician has to be certified to go through that process with you so that you can get a prescription. But it's not like a willy-nilly doctor, give me a prescription, I'll walk out and buy a blown.
Yeah, because they write prescriptions now for Percocets and OxyContin.
No.
I'm just concerned, well, my concern is the safety, because marijuana doesn't wear off. And if we get all these people, getting medical marijuana willy-nilly, then, that's a problem.
Again, Councilman, I like to think that, doctors are professionals, and I do recognize there's some bad apples. I do recognize that there's some people who work
They
in...
write Percocets just like that.
Right. There are some people who work in the facilities who may, break the rules, but there is a process.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is that, I'm all for the social justice issues, but the mayors really need to get together and ensure that the cities don't get cut out of whatever deal they work out as it relates to revenue, because as everything else, the state will keep as much of that as they possibly can, and then the municipalities have to deal with all the support services, which are costly.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you. Just for the viewing audience, I just want to make it perfectly clear that the discussion we're having is strictly about medical marijuana and not recreational. So we don't want our phones to ring asking, where can I go? We are dealing strictly with a drug that has a purpose. Mr. Clerk?
If it is legal, I can have it here.
Madam President,
I wasn't.
Madam President, if I'm gauging the sentiment of the council, we will not be accepting this as an added starter until...
No.
We'll bring it on the next regular meeting?
We don't even have a backup on it. So
Right.
I know the Corp Council referenced it. I don't have anything in my folder regarding this.
I mean, what's the urgency?
What's
the urgency of this matter?
For it to be an added starter.
Come on.
So council as a whole is not willing to accept it as
Yes. So we will not bring it to the agenda until the regular
next
meeting
agenda.
of the 20th, March 20th.
Thank you.
There is also an added starter which would refer the proposed ordinance to the Central Planning Board for a formal review. This is a resolution referring to the ordinance, this would establish an increase in the application fees scheduled for applications made to the Central Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the Landmarks and Historic Commission. This is basically raising fees.
Who's being appointed to the Landmarks Commission?
No, this was raising the fees to the various organizations. That is it.
Madam President.
For the applicants?
Yes.
If we, let's say, people have to wait 6 months to get an appointment for the board, are we going to charge them more for that? I believe that we have to improve the service before we consider charging people more. If I come to that board and I have to wait 6 months to get an appointment, and you are going to charge me even more for that, I don't think that that's fair. I believe that we have to make sure that the service is provided and then increase the fee.
Yeah, Madam President.
Not backwards.
Because they're already losing money now, waiting
Right.
6 or 7 months. They're losing thousands and thousands of dollars waiting.
Well, Council President,
Yes, Council.
one issue is that Chris is working on legislation that will address irregular lots within the city of Newark. Those are lots that are within a certain square footage. If those are taken off of zoning board requirements, that'll free up a lot of space on the boards. So we're trying to tackle it on 3 different issues. More personnel so that boards don't get canceled, a secondary board, and regulations legislation which will prevent some applications from having to be heard by the zoning board.
Needs to maybe do a presentation at the special conference.
There's a recommendation from Councilman McCallum. You can make it.
Yeah, I want to request that they come before the council at the special conference and do a presentation. I know we had talked about that, but there's a lot of moving parts to that as far as the changing the zoning and.
Hi, I'm sorry, Interim Deputy Mayor of Economic Development. Can you clarify your request? I know you didn't finish.
Well, we
I
talked a
apologize for
lot,
interrupting.
we've been having a lot of discussions about making the department more efficient as far as zoning and planning, where the developers don't have to wait so long to get before the board. So maybe if he did a presentation, I know he has many ideas. You guys have many ideas to make changes. I don't think you can do it standing here right now in 5 minutes.
No, but some of those changes are being put into action presently. I mean, it's a continuous process improvement. So today or tomorrow, what's already on the agenda is as Councilman James pointed out, the increase to alternates, and that's been spoken
Okay,
about.
well, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Yes, and the escrow amount, which is going to be an added starter, the importance of that is that the developers need to pay upfront fees that the city is putting out on their behalf, and the escrow amount puts the onus on them to do that work, and it helps us not take away from our funds to do that work. Every month that we delay this, we're losing $50,000 a month in revenue generation.
What kind of fees are you laying out?
Professional services. Oh, professional services. Do you want more detail? So like, jump in anytime.
Yes, no problem. No, just professional service.
Please state your name and position for the record.
Evans Anyanwu, Department of Economic Housing Development. You know, these fees are for professional services. You know, we have our outside counsel. You know, we have our economic Northwest NW Financial and certain entities that help us in laying out these projects.
So these, and again, we don't have it in front of us, so we really can't comment, but the proposed increases are for applications that go before planning, zoning, historic, for everyone.
Just zoning board. The one
Zoning?
that's before you is just for the zoning board.
You know, I agree with my colleague. I don't have an issue with us making sure that we get our fair share as far as the escrow amount, but there has to be a reasonable expectation that your application is going to be heard in a timely fashion.
Yes.
I mean, I think right now the timing's terrible because
Right.
you come in with your stuff completed and you don't get a hearing for 4 or 5 months. And that's just crazy. Financing could fall apart. There's a whole bunch of things that could put that project in jeopardy. And, you know, I don't blame the Board of Adjustment because what happens in Newark is the way the master plan is constructed, it's like everything needs a variance. So typically in most towns, a lot of applications go to your planning board. In Newark is the reverse. Everything goes to the Board of Adjustment because you have variances for height. You have variances for side yard space. You have variances for parking. And they're just, you know, they're overwhelmed. And that's why some of the stuff that we're working on, you know, could help, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. So
I agree.
I think when you have a situation that we're caught up and there's a reasonable expectation of having a hearing date, then the timing on increasing any fees or escrow amounts, you know, I think we would be more comfortable.
I agree. I think the most important thing you said is that it's not going to happen overnight. As the interim director laid out, these are things that we're putting in place, such as the increase in alternates, the escrow fees. It's going to take a while. We've heard not only the council's concerns, but we've heard the concerns from the developer community, and we're every day sitting down and making sure that we put our heads together to see how we can make this process more efficient.
I just want to add that every development project, especially those who are in the multi-millions, when the interest rates change, that affects the total costs and the fiscal stability of the project. So when we wait or delay 4, 5, 6 months, some of the financial commitments can fall apart. So we could lose projects by having such delays.
And in addition to that, let's say you may have the zoning board meeting, and then you have 5 members show up to the meeting. That's going to be corrected, hopefully, with the addition of the two alternates. But right now, they say last Thursday, somebody was at the board, only 5 members were present, so adjourned, because I don't want to expose getting a no and not approval, and I have to wait 6 more months. So I believe that there is a combination of things that have to happen so that we expedite and we streamline the process so that people, I am certain that people would pay the escrow amounts if they are going to get service quickly.
That's right.
If I may, Eric Pennington, Business Administrator, there are several issues that are being discussed, which the discussion is not really congruent with the legislation that is going to be put before you. You don't know that because you don't have it. So in the first instance, I want to apologize for EHD not getting this information and not being available to discuss it with you. We have my new interim director. I am confident that this is not going to be the case going forward after she digs in and lets the people in EHD know that if they can't do their job, they're not going to be there anymore. I have no question about that. The issue with respect to the alternates, I understand that's going to go forward, and that will be an added starter, and you're going to address it. The escrow, increased escrow, doesn't address increased fees for the work that's going to be done. What it does is it increases the amount of money that the developers will have to pay into an escrow fund so that the city doesn't have to come out of pocket and wait to get reimbursed. And in some cases, we're not going to be reimbursed because we haven't the legislation in place. So there's not increase in fees, it's an increase in the amount of escrow, but we didn't do a good job in presenting that to the council, and so it will be deferred. If the matter is going to be an added starter, as I've discussed before, we are working diligently to eliminate the amount of added starters so we can avoid this kind of confusion. If EHD believes, or the administration believes, that this is so important that it should have been an added starter, the council should have been apprised ahead of time. That should have been done by talking to the clerk, making sure that the information that is consistent with our request to have this matter go forward be presented to him so he could present it to the council. And to the extent that we have enough time to do so, each council member should have been contacted by EHD. And it's being represented to me, and my expectation is, through our new interim director, that's going to happen. So again, I apologize. I know that the additional members for the zoning board will go forward. We appreciate that the escrow should go forward, but we didn't do a good enough job to present that to you. It's not an increase in fees, so we'll get that information to you. I think there is one more added starter, though, that deals with the lead abatement, not through EHD, but it's a lead abatement issue where we're going to increase the amount of money that we can purchase items through Home Depot. Is that, who's here on that one? You're here on that one? So that's still going to go forward, right? Okay. So we do intend to have that go forward. We need that in order to meet our commitment to do abatements to keep our funding appropriate. So we are asking that that go forward.
Any other? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk?
We have to discuss the reappointment of the judge. There's also an item that would grant a 23-year tax abatement to the 98 Freeland Real Estate Urban Renewal Entity, LLC. This is for a project to deliver a site pad and construct a 110-room hotel above the existing parking garage located at 94-120 Freeland Avenue.
Correct. Sponsor.
Can I second? Can I second? Thank you. I'd like to be known as a seconder. You beat me to it.
For those who don't know, this is the site at Poinier Street and Freeland Avenue. Currently, it's home to Snap Parking. So they actually are going to build a hotel on top of the current parking decks, which is a feat I'd love to see.
There is a loan agreement and acceptance of a promissory note on the agenda. This is for a HUD project.
What?
Doesn't identify who.
EHD.
Yes.
Evans is here.
Good morning, Evans Anyanu, Economic Housing Development. Speaking with respect to the Section 108 funding, as most of you know, Ball Ride Development, one of our developers here in the city, we're we requested through HUD forward funding in amount of $12 million, which will be used not only for the Borai project, but also for the 505 project that is needed in the Simone Center. But particularly with respect to Borai, they'll be building 169 residential units, two commercial retail spaces, and it'll be at 3654 Rector Street here in the Central Ward. That project is also expected to give the city about 33 units of affordable housing.
That's a project that has been under construction for 10 years.
Pardon?
That's the same project that has been under construction for 10 years.
That's correct. Oh. It's been not particularly 10 years, but it's been in construction for a while.
Well, I remember vividly when that was the one on Rector Street where the high school was.
Right.
Science High School. That I remember vividly when when Shaq came to Newark to have the grand opening. Well, not the grand opening, the groundbreaking for that, and that must have been, if not 10, close to 10 years.
But you know, groundbreaking, and as you've seen through your tenure here, like the groundbreakings and actual constructions.
No. I just wanted to make sure that it was for that same project. And I believe that we have, is this the same 12 million or whatever it is that we promised them some time ago?
That's correct. What occurred, which was, we missed some funding deadlines, and then we had to, because it changed the loan number, we have to now come back to the board.
Okay, and this is a loan that we're making to them, or is this a grant that we are making to them of money that we are getting loaned to us from HUD?
It's the latter. It's a forward funding, because money that we're going to get from HUD, but they're giving it to us, by way of forward funding that we're going to make available to the developer.
How much money, I believe I asked that question before, how much money have we given to Borai for that building? Because I believe it's much more than that, that we have given them for that.
But for that particular building, I don't have the exact numbers with me, but I will make that available to you.
Would you please?
Will do.
Can I ask a quick question? I thought the building belonged to Shaquille O'Neal, but it was transferred from the Borai Corporation.
Mr. O'Neal is a partner in that.
Shaquille has 0.00001%.
Yes, what?
0.00001%. And they are using his name because he's from Newark, but his investment is very limited.
Well, he does other stuff. I gotta take a
It's like the theaters. The theaters are Shaq theaters. His investment there is minimum too.
Okay, I'm going to argue with you.
Thank you very much.
I have a quick request.
Councilman Callan.
275, what is this, 275-277 16th Avenue. I think I requested a status update like over a month ago, because the guy is coming to speak about it tomorrow.
275.
Tony with that McWater barbecue.
What's the address on that again, Council?
275-277 16th Avenue.
That was sold to somebody else.
Yeah, we need a status.
I'll have that to you by this afternoon.
The latest status.
Could you also send that to every council member?
Not a problem.
Because he'll be visiting each one of us individually. Trust me.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'll be, that's right.
Not a problem.
Of Newark, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you never do anything else, make sure you do that. Mr. Clerk, where are we?
We have another added starter, which would be the use of a state contract for walk-in building supplies with Home Depot.
Yeah, that's the one that was mentioned by the
Yes.
DA.
Yes, just a few moments ago.
Hi, Naja Davis, Assistant Purchasing Agent. So the Department of Health would like to expend grant funds that will expire soon. So they wouldn't need to spend it in Home Depot for the lead abatement. There will also be another one for furniture.
Couldn't spend the money.
That's true.
If you don't spend it, if you don't spend it.
Unspent.
So,
Well, at least you're putting it to real good use. Finally. Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Clerk, any other items?
As was just mentioned, there is also an added starter for furniture.
Jesus.
Or furniture? If it's not for me, I'm not interested.
For who?
it's the same.
Furniture for whom?
For
It's
Corporation,
for the
We're
administration.
making a joke out of this,
Oh,
you know.
same department.
Really.
for Corporation Council?
Yes.
Corporate
No.
council.
Department of Health. Also grant money.
They have the grant. They have to spend the grant. So
Yes.
Oh, yes, they do.
Which department is this?
Department of Health.
Same department?
Yes, sir.
Not the law department?
No.
Okay.
Thought Kenyatta wanted a new desk like that.
made in China.
Thank you.
With the cost of
Mr. Clerk?
And there is an amendment or an added starter which would be the amendment number 1 to the agreement to provide professional engineering services on an as-needed basis to increase the contract amount by $126,847.
That had to be an added starter.
That's
the engineering firm.
H2M Associates.
Who?
H2M.
Oh, Court Counsel?
I'm not familiar with it at the moment. I don't have a list in front of me. I'm just assuming that because no one's here, that can wait until the next meeting.
Let's have it for Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay. Finally, I would just inform the council that tomorrow during the meeting, the representatives from the St. Patrick's Day Parade will be here for their annual presentation before the parade.
Who's the Grand Marshal this year?
Don't know. I should know, but I don't.
I think it's Carlos this year.
I thought it was Louis Lopez.
Louis Lopez was Puerto Rican, right? Puerto Rican.
Oh, I thought that's what tomorrow was. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize.
Louis Lopez, Grand Marshal.
Well, I'm delighted that Louis Lopez is the president or the chair of the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I'm looking forward to it.
It's the Gonzalez family, Sammy Gonzalez and the senator.
Mr. Clerk?
Madam President, before we go into executive session, I'd like to do the public speaking portion. This is a 30-minute period in which speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak. When you step to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record. You will see a small timing device on the podium in front of you, and the audience will be watching on the timing device to my right. When you reach the 2-minute mark, the yellow light will illuminate. When you reach indicating that you have 1 minute remaining for summation, and when you reach the 3rd minute, the red light will illuminate, and there will be an audible sound. Please look forward, speak into the microphone. We are recording these proceedings, and if you turn away, we may miss part of your statement. Please address questions to the chair and not to individual council members. Is there anyone present that wishes to speak at this time?
No one appearing, Mr. Clerk.
No one appearing? Motion to go into executive session, Council of the Whole?
Roll call.
Amador, absent. Gonzalez.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Callum.
Yes.
McIver, absent. Osborne.
Yes.
Quintana.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
President Crump.
Yes.
For your right.